Today on CityCast Denver. Crime is on a lot of Denverites' minds lately, and they want to know what is being done about it. The city's district attorney's office handles the prosecution of big cases involving drug crimes and police misconduct and more. With the DA position on the primary ballot, voters will be deciding who leads this important office and how they plan to keep the city safe. This week, I'm sitting down with each candidate. You'll hear from Leora Joseph today, and be sure to check out yesterday's interview with John Walsh. Today is Thursday, June 13th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Leora Joseph, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thanks. It's exciting to be here.
Why do you want to be DA?
Why do I want to be DA? Well, I love Denver. It's a great city with great people, great ideas. And I think right now we're going through a bit of a tough time. And I have real solutions that can help us gain back our city to be that city that we all love. So that's why I'm running.
What are some of the problems that you see?
Sure. I think I would say one of the biggest problems we have right now is what I'm going to call people are feeling unsafe. People feel that there's a lot of dysregulated behavior. People are feeling uncomfortable being downtown. We have an auto theft problem. We have a gun violence problem. We have an fentanyl overdose, fentanyl distribution problem. These are things I worry about. I've spent my entire career working to solve problems like that. And that's why I decided to get in the race. Never run for office before. Never will again. And by that, what I mean is, of course, I'm going to run to hold my seat. Yeah. But I'm not using this as a stepping stone in any way. I'm really excited to serve the people of Denver and be the Denver DA. And I think Denver needs somebody who's really going to be dedicated on solving these problems.
Why do you think you'd be a good DA?
Yeah. Most of my life, most of my career, I have spent in the district attorney's office. I've spent over 20 years fighting for victims. My background is as a sex crimes prosecutor. I've taken on sexual assault, domestic violence, started one of the country's first human trafficking units, and really fighting for justice for the most vulnerable and seeing the ways that the criminal justice system works and the ways it doesn't. And right now, for the last 2 years, I've been working for Governor Polis's administration. I oversee a new state office, 1,800 employees, and a $350 million budget that is geared to change how our court system, in particular our criminal justice courts, handle people with severe mental illness, substance misuse disorder. We can't let our jails be the mental health treatment centers. And so the initiatives I'm working on now have allowed me to look for creative ways that I've learned local municipalities, local district attorneys can make change in that space. And that's why I'm running.
Can you talk about some of those? Because that is something that I definitely wanted to ask you about was like, let's just get into it. The fentanyl crisis, the impacts of incarceration. I'm just thinking about recently we've seen, at least on a legislative level, that there's been moves towards harsher criminal penalties for folks involved with illegal drugs. What's your approach, or what do you think about not only the folks in crisis, but the folks that maybe are part of the issue with selling drugs?
Okay, so I think we have to first start and be very clear. There's two different things. People struggling with severe mental illness, and sometimes that's overlaid with substance misuse disorder. So that's one piece of it. I'm going to talk about the other piece of the traffickers, drug traffickers, gun traffickers, traffickers in girls, human trafficking. We can't tolerate that here. And those people need to be in prison.
So you'd mentioned this earlier, that you'd worked in the sex crimes aspect of the justice system. And Denverite reported that you pledged to, quote, bring massive change to the DA's office and that you want to create a specialized unit to handle only sexual assault. Can you tell me more about what this office would do and why we need it?
Yeah, I love that question. So most of my career, as I've mentioned, has been handling special victims cases, domestic violence, sex assault, and human trafficking. I'm going to give you this analogy. When you, God forbid, have a disease, let's say a God forbid, a cancer diagnosis, you don't go to your general practitioner. You go see a specialist to get the best care you can. And that's an important relationship because it's also someone who's dedicated their life to learning the best practices in that area. Now let's shift it. It's the worst thing happens. You're a victim of a sex assault. You deserve a prosecutor who is an expert in that field, who understands victimization, who understands trauma, who understands how to present a case to a jury, what kind of experts need to be presented. More than that, what we know about best practices involve not just specialized units, but the model of vertical prosecution. I'll explain it very briefly, where police and the DA, from the moment of arrest, are working together until the trial. So you're not handing it off, and a victim isn't telling one person, and then an intake district attorney, and then another DA, and then the trial DA. That isn't best practices. So I truly do believe that we need specialized victims units for specialized crime.
So your opponent wants to create a, quote, violent crime task force to address some of these things you're talking about too: violent crime, the prosecution of drug dealers, treatment options for folks who use drugs. What do you think about the idea of a task force like that?
Mm-hmm. So I think, task forcing is important, and it's very important to stakeholder. I also think we have to start prosecuting cases. And I think lumping drug dealers with people who are struggling from substance misuse disorder is not the right strategy at all. People who are peddling and taking advantage and predatory, they need to be in prison. But people who are severely mentally ill, people who are severely substance misuse disordered and committing and involved in the criminal justice because of those issues, including severe mental illness, they need treatment. That's the bottom line. And the way that the courts are working, there are ways to get people like that out of our jails, off of our streets, and into treatment. So we don't have this constant cycling of jail to the street, that recidivism that's not helping anyone. And it's not allowing us to live in dignity. All of us, when we walk on the streets and we see someone so ill, so sick, and we just ignore, that doesn't help them. We have to stop that.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. Do you support safe injection sites?
It's a great question, and I know it's a really painful issue. And I'll read anything that you give me or any viewer or listener wants to share. The data I've seen both internationally and in cities in our country, like in Oregon, and I'm talking about Portugal, Amsterdam, Vancouver, simply shows a correlation of overdose deaths in cities where there are safe injection sites. Now, I understand that in the moment in the safe injection site, people are safe. And believe me, I think that's important. But before, as a state, we begin to legalize and supervise the use of hard drugs, I need to see different data. I think that we need to treat these problems with compassion. I think treatment is the key. And what I do believe in is working with groups. I think that's a huge piece of it, the advocacy community, the court system, to really move people into treatment. That's something I do support.
So we've kind of talked about this inadvertently, but we have this crisis of unhoused folks.
Yes.
Sometimes that intersects with folks who use drugs. Again, these are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. Sometimes that intersects with particularly housed people's perceptions of crime. What do you see as the DA's role in Denver's unhoused crisis?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So I want to kind of step back first and talk about the unhoused, because I'm a big words matter person. What we know about the homelessness crisis in our country is that 80% of people experiencing homelessness actually are working. They might be sleeping in a closet in an office. They're sleeping in a car. They're couch surfing. These are people who are employed, maybe underemployed. To solve that problem, we need affordable housing, full stop. And we need to do it quickly so that those people don't fall into the problems of the criminal justice system, which happen when people sometimes get desperate. Now, when people in the people I've been speaking to on the campaign trail, when I'm hearing people talk about the unhoused, they're talking about people living on the street. What we know about that population is that the large percentage of that population is struggling with severe mental illness, substance misuse disorder, many of whom are criminal justice involved, not all of them. They're involved, please understand, these are low-level misdemeanors, low-level felony kind of charges that are a product of someone being severely mentally ill. Someone who takes a Sharpie and writing graffiti on a store because a voice is telling them to do that, or a brick through a shop owner. The thing is, we can't, that's not, housed or unhoused, we can't have people committing crime. Full stop. So the question is, what do we do? And this is where I think the district attorney's office has an obligation to get involved along the safety spectrum and create real pathways to treatment using court systems, and other DA's offices around the country are doing this, to use assisted outpatient therapy. It's called AOT, for example, to use a probate court. So it's not in the criminal justice court. You move the case from the criminal justice court to the civil court and have a civil court judge, oftentimes with a nurse in the courtroom, move people into treatment and monitor that treatment. So when they complete that treatment, not only are they on the path to recovery, and we need to make sure there's pathways to housing and voucher systems and all of that, but more importantly, they don't have that criminal justice felony conviction. So we don't have those barriers for employment and housing, etc. That's how we start to break the cycle.
What do you see as the DA's role in the community? Like, what does the DA's presence look like on a day-to-day basis in any Denver neighborhood?
I love this question because I would say the three big buckets of my platform are accountability, pathways to treatment, and community prosecution and community engagement. And I want to explain what that means. A few things. First of all, the DA has to have a role wherever safety is being discussed, even if there's not criminal justice issues. But we have to work together on the safety issues so that we're preventing criminal justice incidents. And I think that's one of the reasons that the local 858 Denver Fire has endorsed me, because they are players. They have to be at the table. But it's more than that. I want to have a robust community engagement office. What does that look like? We need people in the district attorney's office who are experts in things like gun violence prevention, gang violence prevention. We need a liaison to the public schools who's constantly able to understand and make sense of some of these juvenile arrests so that we really understand who are those kids that we can help, who are those kids we can come up with real treatment plans for and not automatically, handle in the most harsh ways. So I need an office that has a full community engagement office. Moreover, one of the plans I plan to bring to Denver in my plan for change is creating a community prosecution model. This exists in many urban cities, dividing up the DA's office in the 6 districts that we have. We have 6 police districts. Everything's relational, matching up police and prosecutors to be a team so that the police have someone to talk to. They know it's the same group of people. And those prosecutors then have to be both responsible and responsive to that entire neighborhood. They need to know who the school principals are on speed dial. Who are the business leaders in that community, the faith leaders, the mental health workers? Who are the nonprofits and what mental health resources are available in that community? Who's the fire department? All of those pieces have to come together.
I have another question about police, but before we get there, you mentioned this idea of community prosecution. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Yeah, it's called the community prosecution model. It's been used in many cities. Boston is one of them. Maricopa County is another. There's been a few models. It's a model where you align law enforcement within a neighborhood so that everybody knows who's their DA. It's a little bit like a show I used to watch when I was little, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I don't
Great
know
show.
Yeah, it's a great show.
Very familiar.
So
I'm a disciple of Mr. Rogers.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
You need to know who are the people in your neighborhood. And so when families and cases are in crisis and people are in crisis, the DA knows who they are. The police know who they are. So we're all working kind of in that small, making us into a small town, essentially, small community prosecution.
So a lot of this has involved a lot of the things that you've talked about involve a lot of police, and Denver is in this situation where we sort of have a deficit. We don't have enough officers to fill these positions. And the fact is that it's been getting harder and harder to get applicants, keep them during the training and academy to come out and become officers. There have been these conversations about lowering standards for recruits. What is your approach to the DPD's current situation?
Mm-hmm. So I have a lot of different approaches. I'll tell you first of all. I mean, look, first of all, full stop. The mayor oversees the police. I want to be very clear on that, and I trust he has good plans to make sure our full complement is hired. Another big piece, though, is why is there workforce shortage? We have to ask that question. And what we know about workforce development, it's the work I've been doing now at the state level, for example, in our mental health hospitals. We know two things. Money, I don't control that. Morale, that's a big piece here. And when I've been meeting with police across Denver, there's a morale problem. They don't feel supported. And that's an issue too. And so that's an area that by this community prosecution model, by working hand in hand with police, I think that will improve. But here's the real plan that I want to be at the table for. And that is the plan. It's called alternative policing. This is what makes me the most excited. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. So alternative policing is the idea that we all call 911 whenever there's a crisis. That's not going to change. People train their 2-year-olds. Call 911. We're calling 911. The question is, what's the response? When we call 911, we don't necessarily mean arrest somebody. Let's do a classic example. Someone's passed out on the light rail. Maybe they have a needle in their arm. We don't mean arrest them. But when you call police, what you're basically saying, that's their tool in their toolbox. That's what they do. They have handcuffs. They have a taser. So, alternative policing. That is the theory of policing that says we don't always need a police response for everything. And I'll tell you, when as a result of my work for the governor, I get to travel around the state to find models that work. And I go with groups of legislators or other stakeholders. And we went to the School of Alternative Policing in New York. And what they told us is that the Los Angeles Police Department, their union, I mean, these are the LA police, their union came up with a list of 21 things that said, don't call us. Don't call us when the person is passed out on the RTD. Don't call us when your neighbor is mowing his lawn at 5 a.m. Don't call us for that kid's high school party that's loud at midnight. Let's think about alternative people to call, which is less expensive. And we'll have we don't have to talk about de-escalating because it's an automatic de-escalation model. It's an automatic model. And in New York, what they're doing now is approaching the public transportation system with a group of people when they see someone in crisis in the New York subway system that come over, they stop them, they talk to them, they calm them down, water, some food, sitting down on a bench. Those are the ways we help so that not everything has to be a police response.
What is something that current District Attorney Beth McCann did that you would have done differently?
I think the office needs to be organized differently. And I've talked to you a little bit today about some of those plans. First of all, the vertical prosecution model. So you're not having intake and another DA that does the bond review and then another DA that handles motions. And then, that I don't believe in that. I believe in matching that up, especially in victim cases. I believe in having distinct units, as we talked about, for victim cases. And I want to implement for serious gun violence to have a few prosecutors who are solely focused on gun violence crimes so that we can move those cases quickly through the system. They're not bogged down in discovery and other things, hold people accountable. And the community prosecution model, I really, really do believe in it. And I think it would help Denver a lot.
What do you think Denver isn't doing right now that we could be doing better?
I think we're ignoring people and crime. And I have a problem with that. First of all, this idea that if your car gets broken into, if someone throws a brick through your business, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. That's not right. That's gaslighting. And it might not be the most serious crime. I understand that. I've handled only very serious crime, but we can't ignore crime. When you ignore crime, it doesn't go away. And so we cannot ignore crime. There has to be consequences. But when I talk about consequences, I don't mean everybody has to go to prison for 100 years. That doesn't work. We know that. That's where we need to have creative solutions. And my plan for those suffering from severe mental illness and drug addiction who come into contact with law enforcement, who are committing crimes because of their disease, that's where we need innovative, bold solutions. And that's what I plan to bring.
So before we go, I just have one question that is not serious. Where do you like to hang out? Like restaurant, bar, park, whether it's your neighborhood or just your favorite part of the city, where might we find you on a Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a homebody, I admit. I like being with my kids and my community. I do love a good beer garden. Those are fun. I love all kinds of areas here. I love Levin Deli. I go there a lot. That's pretty yummy. I know. I'll go anywhere that someone else is cooking and cleaning, quite frankly. That sounds fun for me.
Well, Leora Joseph, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This was great.
And be sure to check out our interview with the other DA candidate, John Walsh, which ran in our feed yesterday. Oh, and by the way, who are you voting for and why? Give us a call on the Denver DA Election Mania hotline at 720-500-5418 and let us know. Again, you can text or email us at 720-500-5418. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell an election judge about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya. The Sisters Attorney's Office